I want a good person who can hire great people and have a sense of the common good with all the subtleties that involves foremost in their mind, and that everyone buy into that at the head of the ship.
We each have our own gift to give, and yours is unique. Welcome to the Calvin Corelli Show. I'm really excited to have you. All right. Hello, everybody. I am Calvin Corelli. I'm here with Rikki. Rikki, I don't actually have memorized your last name. What is your last name?
Tartar.
All right. Rikki and I met just a couple of weeks ago, and through a network that we're both a part of, our group that we're both a part of, and had this conversation ended up talking about politics. And Rikki is planning on voting for Biden. I, as you may know, am not going to vote because I don't get to, but if I were allowed to vote, I would vote for Trump. And so we started to have a conversation about that. And Rikki very generously volunteered to jump on with me and talk some more about that. And what I'm really curious about is your reasons for voting Biden, because to me, it's all about the information that we're fed, or like consume. Let's not say fed. That sounds negative, but the information that we consume and what we see. And if we put our minds and eyes together and ears together, we can see more. So my goal here is to try to see through your eyes and really understand what you're seeing that I may be missing, or what I'm seeing that you may be missing. And then together we'll end up hopefully enlightened in some way from the conversation, from the experience.
Okay.
And hopefully something that's valuable to other people as well as a model.
I would consider myself very conservatively middle of the road. I'm not very political, and I don't feel incredibly strongly about individual issues. But I do feel very strongly about representative democracy. And in representative democracy, I can't possibly be the expert on every single issue. The moment I ever dive into any issue, I realize there's so many layers that the amount of time it would take me to really understand all the issues involved in healthcare or involved in trade deals or negotiations. Yeah, at that point, I would have confidence in making a decision. I don't trust, gut decisions. And so the whole object of representative democracy is I vote for someone who represents me and goes to the trouble of doing all the hard work and has the hassle of making the decisions. So in that respect, for me, the most important thing is choosing a person that I respect for their level of work, their level of intelligence, their level of compromise and ability to get things done, and just in the same way that I invest in their ability to attract and lead great people, because no one person can be an expert at everything. And so that for me is the most important thing. And then I kind of go, gosh, bad luck. You have to make those tough calls about the virus, about reactions to events that happen everywhere, about dealing with forest fires. That's not a fun job, but you got that responsibility on your shoulders. But I want you to be an excellent person that I would invest in. I want you to have below you phenomenal people that really look up to you and go, I want to work for that person, because you can't do everything.
So I think that's a great point. So what I hear you say is their ability to make sound decisions that are, better, basically better than what you would have made, right? If you had the time to dedicate to it, which you don't. So decision-making skills, but and good judgment in that sense is what I'm hearing you say. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the other piece I think is very interesting, which is the ability to attract and lead great people, because I think that is, the way I see it, that's an area where the current president has definitely struggled, and I think that my take on that is that the demonization of him that happened even during the election and especially during his presidency, has poisoned the well for him in terms of like that's made it a lot harder for him to attract good people. Also, the fact that I think that there has been a decades-long history of deep corruption in the government, and he's basically fighting that, makes it hard to attract good people, right? And I think that's been a huge challenge for Trump in this presidency. I don't know to what extent that was an issue for him before he ran for president, right? As he was running his private business, seems like he was able to get shit done and attract. I don't know the quality of the people that he attracted, but he was able to achieve a lot of things. So I would assume that it's a skill that he has, but the climate around him has made it really hard for him to do it as president.
Maybe, but the bench in previous administrations has been much stronger than the bench in this administration, and to a degree, it's very hard to say, well, the whole system is crappy and corrupt. The reality is, it is what it is, and transferring. If you run GE or you run GM or whatever, you deal with enormous complexity, or you run Esso or any. I mean, and he had that. Who was that great guy from Esso? I mean, I didn't particularly agree with his politics, but I looked at that guy and go, okay, this is a fellow that's run some serious stuff and dealt with some really subtle and tough decisions. And that body of experience is great. And if you bring that skill set to bear in this role, that's great. But that person didn't stay. And a lot of people, I feel really bad. I can't even remember his name. So many people have come and gone. So I think it's just, it is what it is, right? There's a lot that I find that isn't perfect. There's a lot that isn't perfect in the Constitution. There's a lot that isn't perfect in for me, in the system of government. You just have to read history and see how different people have approached it. There's a lot that isn't perfect in human nature that when people come together in institutions. So I'm not sure, that you can say, well, because the environment isn't perfect, it's not fair on him. The environment.
Yeah, I wouldn't say characterize it as the environment is not perfect. I'd more like it's poisonous is the environment.
But it is what it is, right? You can't say it is what it is, and in a lot of ways, you just have to look at other.
Right, but like so look
other
at it
countries,
from this.
They're all poisonous in some way.
But let's look at it just to be fair, following your logic, right? Let's play pretend for a minute that let's say that the political class is bought, bought in the sense that, campaign contributions, and now they kind of owe some favors to, plus they want to keep the money rolling into, say, big tech, right? Silicon Valley, to the CCP, to I don't know, big pharma, for example. Like they're throwing in tons of money and basically, let's say, quote unquote, own the majority of Congress people and even like high level government workers, right? And mainstream media
Go on, keep talking. I'm not sure I've bought into individual government employees, but let's keep.
Sure. Well, yeah, okay. But let's. I'm not saying that's true, but let's play with the idea that it might be true, and then plus the media, the mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, Washington Post, New York Times, those institutions like hating, just like deliberately twisting the story and telling a story every time of this like maniac, crazy person that's like uber divisive and whatnot, right? So they successfully paint this picture, and the people that work for him in the administration, a lot of them actually sabotage. They don't do what they're asked to do, and they leak stories all the time, and they lie about like making it sound like way more chaotic than it really is. And then you're like, well, look how terrible he is at attracting quality talent. And everybody knows that if you work for Trump, you're going to be tainted for life with like the Trump monstrosity, right? So because of that depiction of the president, so you're saying, well, look how bad he is at leading, therefore we can't have him, right?
Well, hang on a second. I said I believe in representative democracy. I want someone who represents me, because that's what representative democracy is, to be of the value, to be an excellent person, to be better than me, and to do all the hard work and to make the tough decisions and to have values that I appreciate. And the reason is because I find everybody concentrates on the issues, but the issues change. I mean, the virus, no one was voting for the person who would best deal with this pandemic, but it stuff comes up and the world changes. And when the world changes, it's not, I don't want the person that's always going to go this way, who's told me exactly how they're going to go. I want the person that I respect the most to make the tough decisions with the tools they got at hand, and they just can't do it all themselves. So yes, there's a lot of misinformation. Yes, there's a lot of cynicism, particularly in America, about government. I'm maybe less cynical about government because I think I'm not a pure libertarian. I think we come together as human beings to create government, to look after and to help each other. We do it. We cover government not out of a necessity of evil, but because actually our life is a lot better with government. And you just have to go back to the Old Testament, that the Israelites were forever, electing judges and choosing kings, not because of any reason other than people need government to produce better life. So
values is what you were saying.
It's just the person. You just add it all up. It's absolutely values. Values are at the core of it. And I want
what are the values that you see that in Biden that makes you want to vote Biden? What are the values that you see in Trump that makes you want to?
I'm not. Do you know what this is? I'm not going to stand up and wave a flag for Biden. It wasn't my first choice. Not that I don't belong to a political party, so I didn't get a vote on the primaries. But I'm not going to wave a flag for Biden. I'm going to not vote for Trump.
I think a lot of people, I think that's a massive thing right now. Yeah.
Well, because frankly, every contender I saw was for me, had the opportunity of doing better. And he's had 4 years, and I have not seen any excellent people still there from he hired. And you can say, yeah, it's all correct. Well, I don't know what you say, but yeah, the proof's sort of in the pudding, right? And you kind of look at it and you go, there isn't a sense of lifting me up, making me feel I can be better than myself and making me a better person. He's not someone that I admire. He's not someone that I think that my 13-year-old daughter is seeing a role model. And that stuff, 4 years. I mean, you can't turn over your secretaries of state so much and then blame it on the environment. I mean, you got to deal with what you deal with. And this isn't a New York real estate where you're the boss and you cut the deals and what you say goes, and that's it. Thank you very much. And it's a simple issue where I understand all the moving parts, so therefore I can make decisions. Tough luck. This isn't. You can't possibly understand every single facet of running a country. So you just need a phenomenal team. And when you have a phenomenal team, you've got to be able to delegate to them. And there is, I haven't seen it. I just haven't seen delegation. I haven't seen excellent people hired. I've seen people rotate. And I've seen people who rotated come out and say wacky things about what's going on with a lack of initiative. And after a while, if it, walks like a duck and sounds like a duck, you got to go, it's a duck.
Right. Yeah. It's super interesting. Because what I see is, I think basically all of the people who've been in government for a long time are sort of on the take and in on the racket in some shape or form, right? I mean, even someone
Did
like
you feel that you might be
hmm?
kind of insulting people who are doing jobs for public service? People don't go to government to make money. They go to government for, I mean, the great people go for a sense of public service, just like people don't become priests for the power.
I just don't know how many great people we have in government, to be honest. Like, there's a lot of people that end up getting really rich off of it. I mean, Joe Biden has made, apparently I saw something like 16 million
America.
over the past several years.
You know what, Calvin? You and I both came to America, right? You don't come to America and you don't go and enter politics. There are so many ways to make money in this country, and it's so set up for entrepreneurs and successful people to get well rewarded that entering into a world of politics for the sake of making money, I just don't buy it. I just don't buy smart people do that. I think, I just think
I wouldn't say smart people do that necessarily, but I think that people do that all the time, or they get in for the right reasons, and then like the kind of the inertia of the place takes over. And I think, that
maybe you're right. All institutions corrupt. All institutions at some point, become self-perpetuating, and it needs a shake-up in some way, shape, or form for all institutions. And that's maybe a systemic problem. I mean, there's a lot of systemic problems with America, and there's a part of the issue is that the Constitution is so, and I'm comparing it here with England. The Constitution here is so set up to protect the status quo. It's so hard to create change that, that at some point there's a break. At some point you've either got to believe it's like a second.
In what way does it make it hard to make change? Like, you can amend it. There's a process for amending it, right? There's.
I mean, if I compare it with England, I'm just comparing it with other countries and different constitutions that have grown up over the years. Now, like look at.
So in what way? Make it specific for me? How specifically
in
does
England,
the Constitution make it hard?
In England, the Parliament is sovereign. So if there is a majority in Parliament, one elected group that says, from now on, all street signs are going to be painted in purple, or it is whenever you greet someone, you have to raise your hat, or whatever ridiculous law they decide to make.
So is the fact that there's both a House and a Senate, is that what you're?
No, there's just one. Well, there is one Parliament, which
in the U.S. In the U.S.
Oh, in the U.S. you've got this mix, and I'm not a constitutional scholar, so I look at it as I merely look at it from the basket view of history. And in my comparison, from having studied history of other different constitutions, all the South American nations that set up their own constitutions, and the whole 18th and 19th, but particularly 19th century, there are all sorts of different experiments. And America was looked at as a great example, as was England.
This was phenomenal. I think it's phenomenal. Like, to me, it's phenomenal. Like, there's a constitution which talks about certain things, and there's a lot of things that it doesn't talk about, but it gives you rights, and it says here are things that you can't take away from people, which I think is a really good idea. It's the idea that we as people, we give our government certain powers, but the rest remain with us, and states can do, it's not it's a republic, right? So the federal government is not supposed to make all the rules. The states can make their own rules for what they want to do, as long as they don't infringe on your core rights. I think it's a phenomenal system.
You're entirely right, and I'm at risk at this point of, I said, being rather superficial in my constitutional comparisons. So I'm going to be. I'm going to give broad brush stuff in the hope that no one's going to yell at me for mistaking it. But the American Constitution added in the Bill of Rights after the Constitution as a classic Enlightenment view to there are some inalienable rights, and the American Revolution was sort of dovetailing with the French, and the French and they both drew from this Enlightenment philosophy. And they both had this question of, individual rights, the right of the state, of the government, and the right of the government, and the right of minorities to be protected, and the whole issue of representative versus direct democracy. And all those issues were boiling around in the 18th century. And America came up with this constitution, and it had the peculiarity of being, of this federalist issue of, you've got the states and you've got the federation, and that was never fully sorted until the Civil War. And other countries had that same issue. If you look at the revolutions in Colombia and Venezuela, what was then Gran Colombia, and the north of South America, they struggled with this issue of federalism and centralization and decentralization. And this is stuff that's all work in process, and some of them worked well and some of them didn't. And America did work well, but it had that anomaly of the state, because it was struggling with this concept of centralized authority versus decentralized authority, and was trying to patch it together. It made the big black horror show compromise of slavery that absolutely was that poison in the apple that eventually came out in the Civil War and hasn't fully been exorcised, really. I think I sort of feel American constitutional experiment doesn't really lance that boil fully. But in England, I was going back to the point I was making. In England, Parliament came to its series of governments from a completely different direction. It had its revolution in the 17th century, and it came to it from a question of the sovereignty of the people versus the executive, the king. And so the sovereignty of the people relies on Parliament, and in Parliament, and it's absolute in a way that it's not in the States. So if England wanted to reinstitute slavery, it could do it with a 51-49 majority in Parliament. And that's it. There's no legal resource. There's no way you can go to a court to defend that. And that's bad because it can create the tyranny of the majority, but it's good because you can make some very rapid changes, or you can change with the times in a way that I find America has a tough time changing its constitution and changing with the times.
So what is the change with the times that you would like to see America make that it can't make or isn't making?
Now you're going off onto a Rikki personal. I think healthcare is screwed up in this country. Personally, I think healthcare should get shoved down to the state level. But that's just my personal opinion. And it's a glib personal opinion. And like a lot of politics, I'll just go with what the majority thinks because I live in a democracy. But I think the capability of America to make changes in providing health and social security to its citizens.
So is there anything constitutionally that prevents America from doing that? Like you're saying, like each state can do what they want, and Mitt Romney famously did so in Massachusetts, and I think people were saying it was quite successful. I don't think there's anything constitutional about it. To me, it's
maybe you're right. Maybe I'm talking rubbish, and that's not a constitutional issue. And I'm not. I don't really think it is. And I'm sort of finding myself on a pedestal here that I happen to have stepped up on rather than climb up on. And what I'm saying is what it is, and it's really hard. I mean, it's really hard to make an amendment, right, to the Constitution.
Yeah, no, it is intentionally so, right? But
absolutely.
It's been done. Like, how many amendments are there?
Bad. I mean, it's also
been successfully done many times.
Yeah. When was I can't remember when the last one was, but pretty long time ago.
No, it's a long time ago, but it was done, right? So.
When was the last amendment to the Constitution?
Yeah, Constitution, Congress.
Hey, well, I'm not arguing for American Constitution to change. I'm not arguing. I'm just happen to say that it does make change very difficult in America. The whole system. It makes
certain kinds of changes, right? Because like the state level can do what they want, right?
Well, yes and no.
As long as they don't
legal issues, the state can't
violate the Constitution. But that's pretty much the only thing they can't.
the states can't institute slavery.
No, because that would be violating the Constitution. But they can do whatever they want as long as they're not violating the Constitution, which is, I mean, it's a fairly short document. So yeah.
Yeah,
so
well,
let's
again, as I said, I'm not really, I'm not waving any flag in this issue other than we came to this point by saying let
me ask you a different question, Rikki. So talking about healthcare, like one of the things that I like to do is instead of like, oh, I want this solution or that solution, let's talk about the goals and the values, right? So what would be an outcome? What would the ideal outcome for you be in terms of healthcare in this country?
Wow. I'm a fan of what is painted as socialized medicine. I believe that we come together as a people as a people, we come together to form a government to look after each other. And there are certain things that need to be done are better done at the state level than at the state, small s, not state.
Got it. Yeah,
at the governmental level than at the individual level. And just so like let me to strike, union rights, let me
ask you, so let me just be more, so socialized medicine though is not a goal. That I would say that's a policy, right? So what is that? What is the outcome that you hope that socialized medicine would get us?
Thank you. Yes, thank you for pulling me back. I don't care how it happens, but for me, it's really important that we all care for each other, and that as I live in a society, that I feel that my neighbor, and I'm taking a biblical view of my neighbor, has a backup that will look after them if the proverbial S hits the fan, and that stuff happens. And I look at my godson in Scotland, who was in a car accident at the age of 17 and is a paraplegic, and it would have ruined his family here. Whereas I felt proud of the British health service and the British system of communal care, I would say, that basically said, you know what? Yeah, these things are terrible accidents that happen to a tiny proportion of the population, and we're just going to do what we can as a society to mitigate and make that better, because, God forbid that it happens to us. And
so are we talking about, is this healthcare or is this like disability?
Well, it's both. The two are lumped together. For me, it's the lump together. It's a combination of one and the other, right? It's providing excellent, unquestioned hospital service, and then continued support for the family, and then rehabilitation of the home, and then care for making sure that in as much way as possible he and his family can live in a positive, contributory way without dealing with all the paraphernalia of the private organizations that have all got their own agendas. So I just want to feel that.
My question is like, is the government the best vehicle to caring for?
Maybe not. And I'm not waving. You asked me a very specific question. I'm not waving a wand to say this is how it should happen.
Right.
I just don't consider myself, as I said, I'm quite apolitical. But I want to go to sleep knowing that my neighbor, when the typhoon batters their home and kills their mum and leaves their kids unable to go to school, is going to take care of them, is going to be taken care of. And
somehow,
that's why I gladly pay my taxes, because it is a public insurance scheme. God
So
forbid
one
it
of the-
happens to me, but I want to
Yeah, yeah.
go to bed enjoying my beer and spaghetti in the knowledge that I don't, that someone else is,
Yeah.
that's going to happen.
Because another thing
Could it be
is, like, I mean,
outsourced to private? Sure. I mean, sure,
right.
provided that care is given that is needs blind.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so a lot of like where we're at now is that the government takes a huge chunk of the output from everybody, right? Like, 30, 40, 50% in taxes at the income level, and then sales tax, and, all kinds of other taxes and fees and whatnot. That adds up to a pretty large chunk of the economy. And then that doesn't even cover a lot of healthcare, right? That is currently outside of that. So the numbers here are pretty staggering. I feel like there's a lot of organizations out there that Christian organizations, for example, that help out people in all kinds of ways that are struggling, right? And I feel like that happened more when the tax burden was less. People were better to take care of each other, and then they're more directly involved with the people that they take care of versus the nameless, faceless,
Well, this is the 1,000 points of light, and argument of was it George Bush Senior or I can't remember. I think it was Senior.
I'm not familiar with that.
Points of light. I mean, I don't see one rather the other. And just going off on an interesting tangent, there was a year because of the tax code or something when I had to pay to run two tax. And it was a really interesting moment when I had to pay tax in the UK and I had to pay tax in the US on exactly the same income. I had to fill in all the tax. It was like double pain in the neck. And I had to do both. And I ended up, and it was absolutely eye-opening for me because I'd always assumed I paid less tax in the US. And then I discovered that actually I was paying the same tax in the US and the UK. Now they have a tax treaty, so I didn't end up doubling the tax, but I had to fill in my tax returns on each case. And in the US, I wasn't getting healthcare. It's like, so I paid exactly the same here and exactly the same there. And over here, that covers a nationalized health service, and here it doesn't. So
one of the reasons is that US taxpayers are subsidizing European security, right? Like, Europe.
Yeah. Don't get me off on that, because we live in a democracy. If that's how people want to spend their money, if they want to spend it on armed forces, they want to spend it on something else. I might not agree with every single line item. And this comes back to the very original point. How I would choose to allocate the tax dollars is going to be very different to how you choose to allocate it. It's going to be very different to how someone else chooses it. And these are tough decisions. And there's lots of lobbying at work, which is the libertarian view of let's everyone compete with their money for their voices. And let's have A compete this way and B compete that way. And whatever happens, happens. And I'm not making an argument for one versus the other, but that does lead me back to the fact that I want a good person who can hire great people and have a sense of the common good with all the subtleties that involves foremost in their mind, and that everyone buy into that at the head of the ship. And they're going to make decisions I won't agree with, and they're going to make some I will agree with, but at least I'm going to go, damn it, that person spent the time, knew the issues, or hired great people who knew the issues and made the tough decisions.
Right. So we have only just a few minutes left. Let me wrap up by asking you this. Was there a particular moment when you decided that you were going to be against Trump?
Yeah. I think it was when he first came up with the concept of not revealing his tax. In other words, this isn't transparency. So I was not for him. I was very skeptical about him, but I was ready to give him a chance. I mean, I wasn't ready to chance. I didn't have much choice, right? But when he played his whole income tax with that lack of transparency, was for me a big flash in the pan, a big, or whatever the word is, red light before that first election. You want someone straight up. You want someone for whom truth and transparency is second nature.
Have we seen Biden's tax returns?
No, I haven't seen his tax returns, and I don't listen to any of this stuff. No. As I said, I'm not. I just thought that. Yeah, I'm not and I'm not even going to analyze the tax returns. I mean, present your tax returns, say this is what it is, and I'll kind of go, well, yeah, you're a real estate developer. You've probably got all sorts of shenanigans or whatever. But it's the lack of transparency, number one. And then number two, I think it's the bullying. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's the bullying. It's totally the bullying is what cemented it for me. That's not a way to lead. That's a way to browbeat. And then you just watched the people that were, they started pretty good and they got steadily less good come in to be yes men. And you kind of go, I would not invest. I mean, here we are, Calvin. We're both members of an entrepreneurial networking group. We've both invested money. We've both invested money in other people's businesses. I've taken on VC money, and I just wouldn't invest in Trump as a CEO of a company. I mean, I wouldn't invest in him. He might.
It's interesting because, for me, it's kind of the opposite, because I would invest in it. Just the fact alone that this guy, through sheer will of his own imagination and willpower, willed himself president against everybody. Everybody was against it, right? Everybody, all media companies, all politicians, everybody. He managed to freaking do it, right? That's a plus for getting shit done. Also, things like Middle East peace, he's completely changed the game.
Not A+ for getting shit done. It's A+ for getting that job done. He did that.
But I mean, but then what I've seen him is use that approach. He's used that approach in all kinds of other things, like North Korea, Middle East peace, other situations.
Okay, I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying, and that's a good point about him getting himself to that position. But it doesn't really counteract my point, which is this is highly complex, whereas getting yourself elected is a very targeted, narrow issue, right? Whereas running a government is really not a targeted, narrow issue. It's all of a sudden you've now got to deal with a whole bunch more complexity and need to delegate and to attract great people and to give them the rope to run with it. Otherwise, you're just not going to get stuff done. And in 4 years, Calvin, he had 2 years when he controlled everything. I mean, that was, he only had both houses. And I don't see anything done compared to what he bragged about before he started. But I'm not going to, as I said, it's just the wonderful thing about democracy, as they often say, is the best thing is the ability to kick the bastards out. And you know what? He had his chance, didn't rise to it, in my view. And there you go.
All right, man. Where can people find out more about you? You make games for.
I make games. Yeah, I got nothing to do with politics. So I feel totally, unqualified for all my comments. I make Meet Max games. I make games for large groups, and the games. This is the flip side. I actually think games are fantastic because they get people together to talk. Now you've got me to talk, and we're clearly. We're clearly come from different views, but that doesn't stop me respecting you and liking you for what you're doing and your passion in your world. And the great thing about games is it gives people a chance to interact and compete and to have fun in a very structured environment where the rest of the world is left behind. And for me, games are about people. It's not about playing on the phone or a video or all that stuff. It's about a decision I make affects a decision you make, and this whole social dynamic of a game. And nowadays, that's so much more valuable. And so that's what we do. We make games for between 10 to 1,000 people to play. It gets people talking. It gets people competing. It's fun. You lose, you win, you have little triumphs, and it's over in 45 minutes. There you go.
All right, man.
Amazing. Yeah,
well,
good
thanks
luck.
again, Rikki, for doing this.
Send me a link to whatever your stuff is.
You bet.
Yeah, I like what you're doing. I mean, I like the fact that the talk doesn't devolve to punch bags. That
Right.
you're keeping it, and that you're keeping it at the unpersonalized level. It's too much. Football team. I support this football team, and
for sure.
do no wrong in the other football teams. But
Yeah.
life's so much more complex than that.
It is. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool stuff. Time's up.
Appreciate you,
Thanks a
man.
million. All the best. Stay in contact. Bye.
You bet. Likewise.
Cheers.
Thanks, Rikki. Bye. What up, YouTube? Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, even if you freaking didn't, hit the subscribe button so you get more videos from me, and also hit the bell button so you get tick, 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 notified whenever there is a new video from me. Thank you very much. I'll catch you next time.